Hey everybody, welcome. And I am so delighted to see all of you here. Hope you are doing well. So let me bring Megan in if she's, hey, there you are. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. So this is a pretty significant period of time. I know that we've had a lot of questions, so we want to get to those, but let's talk about some big news in the bar exam world first.
Yeah, first, you guys touched on this briefly last time, but I just wanted to make sure we're getting the word out that the NCBE has announced that after this July exam, they will no longer be giving the online exam, which really is, we were talking about it, it's a bit of a misnomer, right? Because of course, the only thing that's really changing is you will take the same laptop and you will just sit in a room with other people instead of sitting in your own house. But the exam is certainly still given on ExamSoft, and you're still typing it and doing it online in all those ways. Although presumably, although we have not seen for sure, we're expecting that there will be booklets given out again, for instance, for the MPT, and it won't just be exclusively on your computer screen.
Yeah, and I would think the other significant piece of that would be that you won't do the MBE on a computer. It'll be a Scantron, so you'll actually be back to bubbling in the Scantron sheet, which seems like a very retro thing, doesn't it, now, after having been online?
It does, and I feel like the bar exam is one of the only, for the standardized test piece, it's one of the only standardized tests I feel like that's not, for adults, that's not done exclusively online. Yeah.
So what's your take on why the National Conference might have made this decision and announced it now?
This is, I tend to be a big Occam's razor person. So like the simplest explanation is usually the right one. And so I guess just the simplest explanation in my mind, at least, is that for as long as they've been doing it, they've been giving the exam this way, and they view the pandemic as a blip of they were forced to do it differently, but now they would like to get back to doing it the same way that they have. So I think they view it as more of a, we had to give it this weird second choice plan B kind of way. We don't want to keep doing that though. We liked the way it was before. It worked fine for us. Why upset the apple cart? Let's keep doing it that way. So what about you, Jackson? Any thoughts on why you think they might have done this?
I'm older and a little more skeptical than you. I've dealt with these folks for now going on 3 generations. I tend to think that they are worried, they continue to have deep fears about test security. Not to say that there was any breach of test security, because I don't think there was. I think we would have heard if something had happened in February of 21 or in the 2020 exams. But I think keeping the sanctity, the safety of the test is paramount in importance to the National Conference. And I think that they just believe that they can control the test and where it goes and who's got access to it more effectively in an in-person setting than an online setting. I've heard very little to make me think that there were systemic problems with people taking the online exams. We certainly heard, you and I heard, from individual students that had difficulty, but there was nothing across the board where there was a failure of the AI or a failure of the proctoring or the software after those initial couple of glitches. And so I don't think it's a problem of they don't know how to do it or can't do it. So I suspect that part of this is just, as you say, it's to go back to what's normal and known, but also it gives them a better level of protection that somehow the test can't be interfered with and cheating can't occur as readily. That's my best explanation for why they're doing it. It also seems a little odd to me, after all of the chest thumping about how well the online tests have gone, that suddenly we're going back to something that we were doing before. But okay, it's their game, and they've got the baseball and the bats and the umpires. Okay, we'll play it the way they want. But it does seem odd, doesn't it? Everything went great, but we're going to stop doing the thing that went great.
Yeah, and I think that's why I think of it as they're viewing it as like more of a, look at how good we had to pivot, and we didn't want to pivot, but we had to pivot. Look, yay, what a good job we did. Yay, us, great job. But then that doesn't necessarily translate to them to, oh, we should just continue to do this in the same vein, because for them it's, no, why would we? Like, great job that we did under an emergency, but like, we're not in an emergency anymore. Why would we bother keeping it? I think that's at least what I would understand to be that sort of incongruity of why say what a great job it was to do it online, but then not be willing to stick with it on them.
Yeah, I think the other practical consideration is that you had some states in person and some states
Yes.
online. That created double amount of work and created setting up the exam in different formats. And this certainly gets them out of that particular problem. I'm curious what Florida might do, whether Florida will want to give the multi-state, or if they might decide to stay online and drop the multi-state and just go back to their own multiple choice questions, which they are enamored with. That's a harder move for California or Georgia because they still rely on the multi-state. But I've been thinking about some of these non-UBE states might choose, and we did see this in 2020, a few states just dumped the MBE entirely and said we weren't going to do it. And then the national conference came back in a sort of in a rush and said, we'll give you 100 questions online. That was not a great solution. So I don't think we'd go back to that. But I wonder about this. I certainly recognize that individual jurisdictions need time to plan. And by announcing early that they're going to go to an in-person exam, it gives states like Florida and California the time to go out and set up the locations they need, or New York. And so that's probably a practical consideration as well. But I think the key here is that if you are taking the exam in February of 2022 or later, you should assume you are in person. You should prepare as though the exam will be given in person, and you should keep an eye out for locations and registration dates and travel information. That's particularly significant for those taking the New York bar exam who are foreign trained, because that means now you're going to have to get into the US to take the exam. So I think there's some significance. The last thing I would say about that is if you are registered for the July 2021 exam and you've been on the fence about sitting for that exam or deferring, I think it's worth considering the format of the test and which format works best for you, what's best for you from a travel standpoint. And there might be some circumstances in which you ought to just hang in there and try and take the July exam, particularly if you'd have to do extensive travel and you'd have the option of doing the test online in July, but obviously in person. So those are some things to think about, I think, as you're weighing all this out. So interesting news for sure.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Another big piece of news that dropped in the last week or so was that the New York Board of Law Examiners had commissioned a study several years ago about the bar exam. And more specifically, they were looking at people who failed the first time and then took it the second time. Did they pass or fail that second time? And Jackson, do you want to talk just briefly about what they found and what we're doing with that information? Yeah. It's really a unique study. I've never really seen one that was this targeted on people who were unsuccessful first time.
Yeah. This is the first time I can remember in 30 years when they've actually looked at the people that failed, because typically that's a neglected, ignored, abused group. So this was really important, I thought. And you and I, Megan, sat down, went through the report. We looked at the key findings. We dove in. It's a fairly lengthy report. It's about 85 pages, and it's got tons of appendices and stats and so on. And we thought, well, that's just too much to absorb in one sitting for somebody. Mm-hmm. So we created a set of 6 videos plus an introduction, so 7 videos in total. Each one's about 20 minutes in length. And today I just released video number 3, or key number 3. There were 6 key findings about what helped move people from the failing list to the pass list. But what's really, I think, encouraging to me and to you was how well aligned those 6 findings were with what we are doing already at Celebration Bar Review, what we've been doing for years. There was very little there that I went, well, I guess we missed that. In fact, there was nothing. I think we were spot on in the approach that we're taking. The video I just released today is about finishing the exam, time management during the exam. And you and I, Megan, talk about this all the time. People getting through the MBE, getting through the essays, doing the performance test on time. And what a difference it makes. And statistically, it is significant. There is a 20-point swing when you don't complete the full exam. And that's huge. And so one of the things that we wanted to do was to identify not only these 6 problem areas, but then address how you can resolve them. So this is a completely free training series. We are releasing it to our students first. And so you have first cut at it and access. I really hope you'll take a few minutes. Today's video is, I think, about 20 minutes long. It's the longest of them, but it's really filled with information that I think you could find really useful. And the feedback from the first videos in this series have been terrific. We talked about how many hours you should be studying, the quality of your study, and now we're talking about how you spend your time on the exam. We've got 3 more lectures to go. Hope everybody will check that out. It's really fascinating stuff. And I don't say that just because I'm geeked out on it. I do actually. But I just like the fact that we've really got actionable data that supports what we're telling you to do and the approach that we're taking. So I think you should be really encouraged as a Celebration Bar Review student to be going through this. If you're not a student in our course and you're listening to this later, really invite you to watch these videos as well. We'll link to them as we start to release them out to the wider world. And I think you'll find them eye-opening, to say the least. It's cool.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. People should check that out for sure. So that's it with the sort of big news around the bar. Gosh, it feels so good to not be inundated with news related to the pandemic and the bar. Feels like we're coming out of that, which is great. All right. So let's move on to some other questions. I do want to talk first about a couple that are in the chat box. There's 2 questions. I'll break them up and ask one at a time. First is, what score should I aim for in the multiple choice practice questions to be good for the bar exam?
Right now, 45 days out, there's no score that we're interested in. I could care less what your score is. And the reason for that is that the multiple choice that you're doing right now is designed to help you learn the law. It's not designed to be predictive. When you come to the full-length exams later in the course, those are predictive, and I will send an email in which I give you the particular range for the specific test. So if it's an OPE test or a simulated exam, whatever that might be. But one of the dangers right now that I see, and Megan, you can comment on this as well, is that people tend to be too result-oriented and not enough process-oriented. And part of the reason is that it feels like the exam is right in front of you, 45 days away. 45 days is still a very long time. And so it is literally too early to be worried about that. And whatever number I give you, if I said it's X%, and I'm not going to fall into that trap of giving the number, but if I said X%, then you'd be like, but I was really close to that. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't. I've seen people all across the spectrum who, regardless of their scores today, 45 days out, pass the bar exam. And so it truly doesn't matter in my view. Do you have a feeling about that?
No, I completely agree. I think too, for most people, they're still doing MBE questions that are like one subject at a time. And there is just zero predictive value in that. You're not going to sit there and study, you're not going to study Civ Pro and then sit down and take 20 Civ Pro questions. That's just not the way that the bar exam is. So there's really, yes, it's helpful for knowing, okay, here's maybe a subject that I feel I'm more confident in, or where do I need a little more work? But it's certainly not, if you sit down and take 20 Civ Pro questions, that doesn't tell me a ton about whether you're going to pass the MBE on the bar in 2 months. Yeah. Yep. But it's a good question. I'm glad that you asked it. All right. The second question is, which I can answer this one, is the negotiable instruments essay asked for larceny. I'm thinking this is like a practice essay. Okay. So the negotiable instruments essay asked for larceny and issuance of a fraudulent check, but that material was not in the outline or lecture. Is that something that will come later? Or when that happens in essays, do we just ignore that and focus on the material that was recently covered? Okay, go ahead.
No, so let me talk about that. That's a question that is a crossover question. That's how that topic is tested often with crim law. And so the answer is use your brain. Think through it. You know what larceny is. You know what fraudulent check is. You don't need to have studied that. That's a cop-out. Well, I didn't study that. I'm not going to write it. No, you write it. This is the real deal. We gave you that question in that spot in your study guide because we want you to think about it and work through it. Will you come to that subject later? Yes, of course you will. But there's nothing there that you can't answer today. So that's how the exam is given. And there are crossover subjects in all of the exams. So you want to be ready for them. And negotiable instruments UCC3 is often tested in jurisdictions as a crossover. So that's the answer.
I think it's a really great illustration, though. I'm glad you asked this question because it's a really great illustration of how we can get into this kind of thinking in our studies that's dangerous for when you take the bar. So obviously on the bar, you don't get like question 3, negotiable instruments, right? Like it just tells you question 3. And so we want to always be holding things with an open mind and using our logic and common sense and thinking through. If you see larceny is a crime, right? So don't be super binary in your thinking and think, no, but I'm not allowed to deal with the larceny that's in conflict here because I'm not in a crim law essay. Or gosh, I could only talk about it within whatever I remember reading from the outline. And I did do a quick look because I was super confused. And there's a ton about checks. The phrase fraudulent checks isn't in the outline, but there's a ton that's obviously about those concepts about people forgery. I don't know what the context of this question was specifically, but it's definitely in your UCC 3 outline. So anyway, but good question. Don't get caught up in binary thinking about the subjects.
Right.
Okay. Then we had a quick question about the New York bar in February 2022. Which parts are done by computer and what parts are done in paper?
The multi-state bar exam will be paper. Everything else will be on the computer. You'll submit your answers to the essays and the performance test via your ExamSoft software. Whether or not they give you the questions in a question book, traditionally that's what happens is you get your questions in a book, but then you type everything into your computer. But on the multi-state bar exam, they're going to give you the questions in a booklet, and then they Scantron bubble sheet, and you will turn in the bubble sheet when you're done. And the examiners will explain that in their materials as they get closer to the exam. But that's the structure.
Yeah, the truth is that is, since it hasn't happened that way in New York for a while, we're assuming it's going to go back to what it was before, but this is why we preach it every week. Check your emails from the examiners, because February 2022 is a while away, and we don't know. We can't promise anything. They may say, hey, we actually really liked giving the essays on the computer too, and so you're going to do it that way. But certainly we know that when we say it's back to an in-person exam, that does not mean that everything is on a sheet of paper. It means you're still typing on your computer, you're still turning it in on your computer, but we do anticipate it's probably going to be back to a Scantron for the MBE section. Yeah. Yes, but definitely keep your ears out and don't say, oh, but that's how they did it 3 years ago.
Right.
Who knows? These bar examiners, they're funny. Okay. How imperative is it that I complete every assignment on the syllabus? I've done 2 assignments per day, but various assignments have taken me more time than what the syllabus says. I plan on completing 2 to 3 assignments per day. Do you think that is enough?
There's a couple of things in there that are important. If I heard that sort of middle statement, it was, I'm taking longer than the syllabus says to take. That is a deadly sin. I know it's a mortal, venal, I can't remember, but it's a sin. And the reason is that a lot of times people look at that and they say, oh, they don't understand. Phil, I don't blank. I don't speak English as a first language, or I haven't been to law school the next number of years, or I've got small children at home, or whatever it might be. We appreciate all of those things, but that is no reason to deviate from the syllabus. We've set those hours very specifically. And when we say 3 to 4 hours, I really mean it. I don't mean 5 or 6 or 7 or 8. So you're creating your own disaster when you don't follow the syllabus time frame. Even if it means that you're not learning it the way you think you should be learning it, you'll get enough. And we know that because we've done this a long time. We got literally millions of data points about this. And so you just have to follow through. And I think that's going to be the first part of it. The second part is, if you're just starting out right now, you've got 47 days, figure out the whole course takes about 250 to 300 hours to complete. So figure out where you are in the course, separate that out and divide by 47. And that tells you how many hours a day on average you've got to study. So 2 to 3 assignments a day, maybe. I would say the max end of your study should be 8 hours a day. Would you agree with that, Megan?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So 3 hours break, 3 hours break, maybe 2 hours after dinner. I think that's the maximum amount you're going to be able to withstand. So I think that's the other part of it. So follow the syllabus, stay at least or no more than 8 hours. The other interesting thing, just to go back to that 6 keys finding, there was a fascinating finding, I think I talk about in video number 2, where they found that completing an entire syllabus did not equal comprehension. That is, that a lot of people became so obsessed with completing the syllabus that they went through things without learning them, and that was not helpful. Now, you got to temper that a little bit, because going through it in a big box course where you're on a rush schedule every day is very different than what we're asking you to do. We have built repetition into our structure, whereas the traditional bar review course, the standardized course, doesn't do that. So in our course, going through fast means you get more iterations, more repetitions of the material, and that's why we want to keep you at a certain pace. Not everyone gets through every assignment in our course, and we don't get very worked up about that. I can't remember a time when we've been really, you must complete we just don't do that. And we don't do it because we already know what this finding was, which was that just completing all the assignments is not a guarantee of success. And in fact, it can hurt you at the end. So don't do that. So I think there's a lot there in that question, but that's my take right now.
Yeah, the person also asked if adding on nutshells would help.
Yeah, nutshells is a great tool. It's the video nutshells. These are multi-state videos. They're 25 minutes in length, and they are designed to compress and condense the subject, but they are not a replacement for your actual study. They're a review technique. So after you have read or photo read the outline, done the lectures, created your mind maps, worked through multiple choice practice questions, then and only then you should use the MBE nutshells to just play in the background to help you keep that material in your brain, keep it in your non-conscious. And they're very effective for that tool. So I really like them for that purpose, but they are not a replacement for doing the regular lectures.
All right. I think this question is pretty related to what you were just saying about how we do things a little bit differently than the big boxes do it. This student says, at what point will I see my score? I'm asking because I've completed all the substantial assignments and have followed the study guide. I recently completed criminal law for substantial review, and I'm now doing contracts, but I haven't seen any score from all past work done.
Yeah. So what this student was doing was they were trying to compare the way a Barbary or Kaplan or Themis course works, in which you've got some bar across the screen that tells you what percentage of the course you've completed. It goes back to that idea of completion versus comprehension. We don't do that because we don't really care what your completion percentage is. And there's no cumulative score that we're interested in at this stage either. This is about simply checking off the assignments on your syllabus, which is old school, but take a pen and just put a check mark in the box. It works really well, and continue to work through the syllabus. There's no need to keep cumulative score of anything. Just keep working through your assignments and look at the number of assignments you've got to get to. In your syllabus, we say this is the end of the substantive study, and then you'll see a whole bunch of optional assignments. Those are optional because they're going to be based on how much time you have to do them. And our goal is around July 10th, you should finish your substantive study. But some of you won't finish it until July 17th. Some of you will finish it July 20th. They're different dates. And so it just means you'll have a little less review time, and that's not a big deal. Again, I would encourage people, if you're coming to us and you have taken a big box course, it's probably a good idea to just forget what you know from the big box in terms of the structure, because we don't do things the same way. And you're going to be, where's that fill in the blank outline? Well, we don't use them. Where's that progress bar? We don't do it. What's today's lecture? We don't do that.
I don't know, Jackson, if you've done this video yet, but that was one of the 6 keys that the New York study found too, was that for people who failed the first time, if they switched their bar review company for the second time, they were much more likely to pass. And I think it is because, and for so many other reasons too, but also because certainly if the way you did it in the past with, for instance, Barbary didn't work for you, then it's kind of lunacy, right? To keep doing it the same way and thinking, I will make this round peg fit in this square hole. It's not going to work. Try something different. So we do different things differently on purpose, because for a lot of people, they are round pegs and you're just not going to fit in the square hole. So we're not going to try to force you to be something that you're not in order to pass the bar.
Yeah, that's also part of video number 2 in the 6 Keys series. Great. And it was a really interesting finding. Obviously, we liked it a lot. We thought it made a lot of sense, but it supports our experience as well. So interesting to see that statistically they were like, yeah, that makes a big difference. Don't keep taking that standardized course if it's not working for you.
All right. Another student says, I finally listened to the video on selective intuition and it was fabulous. Thank you so much. The seminar that Jackson references in this video, is that the other video in the series titled Learn to Trust Your Intuition for the Bar Exam, or is it something else?
That's what it is. It's Learn to Trust Your Intuition. You'll see those in your video course. So encourage you to do that, particularly as we get closer now to exam date, because selective intuition, again, to go back to the New York study, one of the things that they found, why don't people finish the MBE on the exam? It's because they overread, they issue spot, they try to use memorization, they take too long on a question. Our goal is that you answer the question in 90 seconds, and people go, oh, I can't do that. Well, yeah, you can. And if you watch the videos of successful students that we do, they say consistently, yeah, I did that and I had time left over. It makes a big difference. And taking too long trying to figure out the answer to that really tough question doesn't get you anything on the MBE. There's no degree of difficulty points, right? One question is the same as another. So when you spend 2 or 3 minutes working on a question, you're just that statistically you're putting yourself in a 20-point hole by doing that. And so it's really dangerous to get into that situation.
Yeah. All right. A couple of questions in the chat box. I'm taking the Maryland bar and received an email from the State Board of Law Examiners that read the following: welcome to the Maryland Law Component administered by the State Board. You're required to successfully complete this. Da, da, da. Okay. Does this component require significant study time?
I think they're talking about the Maryland law, the compliance exam.
Yeah. So they give you, like they said, they give you these outlines. We don't do that piece.
It has nothing to do with us. It's a driver's license test. You take it at home.
Right.
You've got it outlines. It's open book.
Yeah.
New York, a few other states do it. Just follow the instructions that they give you. It is really, talking about a nothing burger. It's a nothing burger.
Yeah. So that's the good news.
So some states make you do it ahead of the exam. Some do it after. I don't know what Maryland's rule is, but just follow their instructions. You'll be fine.
Yes. Yeah. But yeah, no, don't overstudy for it.
Please don't divert yourself from the bar.
Yeah. Does this require significant study time? No, it does not. Please don't spend a lot of time. You need to pass the bar. Like this other piece is if you can pass the bar, that really shouldn't be a problem. All right. And then someone else asked, is the bar open book or closed book?
In Georgia, the essays are open book in July of 2021. Everything else is closed book, every other jurisdiction that we're aware of around the country. So it's just that one small exception in Georgia on their essays only.
And just for right now.
And just for July.
We don't anticipate that it's going to stay open book when it goes back to in person. Like we said earlier, who knows? But don't bank on it, certainly.
Yeah, if you're taking the UBE, it's closed book.
Right.
If you're taking California, closed book. Florida, closed book.
Definitely. I am a mom to a little one, 3 years old, and work full-time at a law office. Any tips as to what, if anything, I can cut out? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you should do all the assignments, as we just talked about earlier. There's really nothing to cut out. Avoiding the reading, cutting out the reading is very specialized for people that are retaking, have been through our course before, have mind maps. In that circumstance, I think you could go to BarMaps, for example, and use that product instead of the full set of materials. But outside of that, you should be doing it all. And is it challenging to be working and have a 3-year-old? Oh, yeah. You've been there, Megan. It is very challenging. But you've got to put in the hours. The bar exam is simply not going to give you a free pass with less study. So there's really nothing that you can cut that we would say, well, that really wasn't necessary. What's not necessary is doing a substantial number of simulated exams at the end. And I want to talk about this because it came up in the video I've released today from the Key series. One of the interesting findings, this was fascinating to me, is that 91% of first-time takers and 80% of second-time takers take one full simulated exam in their bar prep. Okay, makes sense. But then they studied the number of people that took 2, 3, 4, or more simulated exams. And here's the key finding. It made no statistical difference in bar pass rate to take those extra tests. It's interesting, isn't it? One simulated exam, yes. 2, 3, 4, or more made no difference, none. And I think the reason is that you end up expending so much energy and time on those that there's an offset. You're tired, you're frustrated. It doesn't get you anything that you don't already know. So when I say that the review assignments are more optional, that's in part what I'm talking about is you don't need to do MBE 2, 3, OPE 2, 3. You don't have to do all that. And so I think sometimes if you're going to cut something, that's where it'll cut. But can you cut out reading property law? No, can't do that.
I wish you could. Oh, I wish you could cut out properly law. All right. I invested in the photo reading course and I do see that it has helped me. I tried testing myself to see the difference in my performance and it's pretty much about the same result though. But I personally don't have much time to see if it will work with the exam quickly approaching.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about this because sometimes I get this kind of a comment from somebody where they give up on photo reading and they shouldn't give up on it. You will not see results from photo reading instantly, and you won't see them really in some cases for a while because what you're doing is building an accumulated body of knowledge, and you have to trust that you do it in order to see the results. So what happens is people photo read or they go through the process and they expect to have a photographic memory or photographic recall of the material they've read. When they don't have that, they suddenly panic and think, oh my God, it's not working and I should just abandon it. That is a huge mistake to make. Photo reading works. It works empirically. It works anecdotally. I just did another interview with a Georgia bar taker that we're going to release this week, who had been out of law school 20 years. And I said, did you use photo reading? And he said, yep. I said, how did it work? He said, I have no idea how it worked, but apparently it worked. And I don't know why it worked, but apparently it worked. It works. You just have to let go and trust it. But I want to encourage you, if you're a photo reader and you're frustrated and you're thinking, oh, it's just, I don't know it in my brain. It's because we're not trying to satisfy your conscious mind with it. It's all going to the non-conscious. So it is completely unsatisfying to your conscious brain. And the result of that is that it will make you frustrated if you're looking here in your conscious mind for something that's back here in your non-conscious. If you're using the mind maps and you're activating through the lectures and the question practice, you will begin to realize that you do know answers and you don't know why you know them. It's because photo reading is there and it's working. So to those of you who might be struggling with photo reading right now, just relax. It'll work. You don't have to make it work. You don't have to do anything to get it to work. You don't have to be technically proficient. Just flip the pages. It works. It works with you or without you. And I think sometimes we get into that controlling mode where we think we've got to understand and control and own everything. And it actually works against you in that situation.
All right. And our last question, I'm going to read the question, but we're going to talk less about what the question's asking and more about the broader principle behind it. All right. So this person said, I have a question on the rules of present sense impression, which came up in a Crim Pro question. And this is this 20-minute lapse too long following a gunshot in order for the statement to qualify as an excited utterance. Some model answers argue yes, others say no. What's the standard rule on this?
Okay. So we're not going to get into the substance of this. I know you responded substantively in the Facebook page. I think what's important to understand is that the concept of essay writing that we teach is not built on the right answer. Mm-hmm. It's built on making arguments. So there is an argument that 20 minutes is too long for a present sense impression, and therefore it's not going to be that situation. But there's also an argument that says, yeah, you could still be in the heat of passion. It could still be something that's fresh and relevant to you. And you want to make the argument both ways and show how the law is applied both ways, and then reach a conclusion. And it doesn't matter which one you reach, because in reality, in that situation, you could have two different judges or juries and they could reach different conclusions. There's no right or wrong here. The point of the essay is not to test whether you right or wrong or correct answer. It's to test your approach to legal reasoning. And often what I find is, particularly with students who are foreign trained, they tend to come from a very narrow, very binary view about these things. There's the right way and the wrong way, and you have to reach the right answer or you fail. That's not correct here. These essays are designed to explore a different set of skills. And so you don't want to get locked into that mindset of, I have to have the correct answer and only the correct answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this concept of the point of the essays is to show your legal reasoning. So they don't actually care. The reason why you could see model answers that come to different conclusions is because they don't actually really care for a lot of the conflicts, how you resolve it. Sometimes the examiners in some jurisdictions give us, for instance, in Georgia, they give you like 2 or 3 essays that were actual essays that people wrote and were passing essays, and they will come to different conclusions sometimes, and they were all passing. They all had the same prompt and they all passed the bar, but they came to different conclusions sometimes in some of these conflicts. And the point is because it's more about your reasoning. And so I think that's a really good illustration of the importance of using fact-based reasoning, right? So the law that you're going to apply is the same in both cases. You're going to apply that law of present sense impression no matter what, but you're going to use the facts. And the example I gave to this student was like that, yes, the only information I had was there was a gunshot and then someone said it 20 minutes later. I would probably say, probably not a present sense impression. But let's say there were facts that talked about how there was a gunshot and everyone was barricaded in a closet together and they could hear scuffling going on outside and they could hear fights and yells for 20 minutes. That 20-minute statement then later, I think, is still present sense impression, right? Because the facts, you could build an argument that there was this ongoing situation. And so even though the gunshot had been 20 minutes earlier, the situation that was causing the panic was very much still active. That's a really great illustration of how we need to use the facts of that specific question to come to a conclusion and not worry about, oh, I gave them the law for present sense impression. My job here is done. Good work, right? It's really about saying, here's the law, but more importantly, here's the conclusion based on the fact pattern that is actually in front of me, which that's the thinking like a lawyer. That's the legal reasoning piece. It's not legal reasoning to recite the law. It's legal reasoning to apply the law. So anyway, that's a little preview of my personal writing workshop if you haven't done that.
There's some wisdom there, huh? So yeah, good question, and certainly gives us an opportunity to reinforce the writing approach that we're talking about that we want you to use. And interestingly enough, in that New York study, to come back to it again, they say over and over again, issue spotting is not the end all and be all. It did not work for a lot of people, and it's a problem of timing, and it's a problem that causes you to freeze up on the exam for no reason. I think this is one of the reasons to stay away from it. So there you go. All right, cool.
Great. That's all. Yeah, that's all we've got for today. Everybody was great. Good questions in the chat box today, guys. Thanks for asking. And yeah, we're just so happy to be able to meet with you guys every week.
Yeah, please check out our 6 Keys to the Pass List video training series. I really think it will be helpful to you. I'm very excited about it. We'll be releasing additional videos in the series over the next few weeks, and love to get your feedback and reactions to that. As always, Megan, thank you for being here, and we will thank all of you for joining us in the call today, and we'll see you again next week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.